Hello and welcome. In this segment of the Evo training series, you will learn how to navigate the screens and how to set parameters and create recipes of the Evo control module and system. Thank you, and let's begin configuration.
Okay, the first screen you'll see is going to be your production screen. So you see the bars in the center there? We're going to select those, and now it comes up to the home screen. In the home screen you have your production, your recipes, configuration, consumption, batch, and maintenance. We'll go through all these later, but today we're going to start out with the configuration. This is the first step that you have to do when you're setting up the machine. You have to configure it first. So I'll select that. Takes us to our first screen, and you can see we have a choice of different languages. We're going to go with the British flag for English. You notice the check mark turned green. We want to confirm by selecting that. And now we're English. We can name the machine. If we have multiple machines, we can name Evo 1, Evo 2, or if it's on the east side of the building or the north side, or you have a name for the spray booth, you could put that in there. And then the site, today we're here in Plymouth, so we have Plymouth entered there. And again, you will have to touch the screen and enter the name in there. Today we're Samez. You do have a serial number here, and if I select the little wrench, it'll take us to another screen where we could put our fluid panel or a mixed plate serial number in. If we had another controller, we could put that in. If we were using a remote control box, we could put that in, so it's all on the page. If you do any kind of recording, you'll have everything you need on there. So we'll go to the next screen. We have the time and the date. So if I need to change any of that, I just touch it, enter whatever time or date it is, select the green arrow, and it will make my change there. And then of course the same for the date. Whatever units, system units I want, cc's, liters, meter, or I can do ounces, gallons, and inches. Today we're going to stay in the cc's and liters. Pressure for the unit, I can do bars or I can do PSI. We'll leave it in PSI for right now. And then temperature, you can hook temperature sensors up to this. So you could set it for Fahrenheit or for Celsius. On this page, we can select the machine type, if it's 2K or 3K. The machine, if I select 3K, switch to 2K configuration, may change recipe configurations. It's just a warning. If I don't want to do it, I hit no. If I say yes, it'll let me change it back. Now I can also run 1K on here, but I don't set the machine up that way. I would do that in the recipe. Number of guns, I can do 1 or 2, depending on my configuration or my application. Number of guns, or it could be number of circuits. So if I have, say, on a flat line, I could have 2 separate circuits. Just so you know, paint optimization, that's one of our new features. What that lets me do, so I select that, I can come over here to the wrench, and I need to select if I want to be able to activate it from the HMI or from a remote switch. So I'm going to select the HMI for now. Goes green down here. What that will do, I'm going to put 50% in here for now. I could put whatever percentage I want, but what that'll do is during production I can stop, I can hit paint optimization on the production screen, and now with 50% set, it'll push 50% of the length of hose will be pushed with solvent while I'm still painting. So that'll allow me to paint and use up that material that's in the hose instead of just stop and flush and put it all to waste. We'll go into that more later when we get into the recipe. We have an airless no flow switch. If you're using this without a gun that has atomizing air, such as an airless gun, you can select this and a little timer will come up. This is basically an inactive timer. So if I set this for 3 seconds, every time after the gun is spraying, at the end of 3 seconds, if it doesn't see pulses, it'll fault. So instead of using the airflow switch on a manual gun, this is an inactive timer where it'll give you so many seconds and then start looking for counts on the flow meter. At the end of that time, if the flow meter's not counting, it'll stop and fault. We don't use that very often, but it is an option there. Okay, on this screen, we can set up for a flush box or a dump valve. And you notice that there's, if I select this, I have a timer here for seconds. One of the options on a flush box is you can get a valve to flush the drain line from the flush box. So that would be, that timer would open a valve and send solvent through the line on the flush box. The dump valve, we select that. That's going to turn on other pages in the recipe here, or in the configuration, excuse me. The next option here is the 2-gun block with flush. We have an option of a 2-gun management block that has flush valves in there, so you can flush each gun independently. Now this does not go through the flow meter, so it is not counted, but it does give you the option of being able to flush one gun while you're spraying the second gun. Flush time hose for gun 1, if I selected that, we flush by time. Remember, it's not going through a flow meter, so we have to flush by time. Our next page is for gun 2, and we have the same options. On this page, we're setting up the hose from the dump valve. Remember, I selected dump on this one for gun 1. Gun 2 does not have the dump. So whatever that hose length from the dump to the gun, now this could actually be reversed if you wanted to and have the dump where the gun is, but it's that length from the gun to the dump then. So say I have, I need to turn that off. I have a 10-meter hose, and the diameter of the hose is 6.25, which is actually 1/4 inch. It calculates my volume. So that's volume will be used when you prime the system, and then also if you do the automatic flush. Set that up in the recipe. If I feel that's not enough material after running and I think I need some more or less, I can go in here where it says correct the volume and I can change that. Say I want to go a little bit more. So that gives you the ability to adjust the volume as needed. I'm going to go to the next page, and now this is from the mixed manifold or the 2-gun management valve to the dump, and I can punch in a value there. And I'm just using 10 again. and the same 6.25, enter, calculates my volume here. Now we're going to gun 2. Gun 2, we did not set up a dump, so we have to set the hose length here from the 2-gun management valve to the gun. This one we're going to say is 6 meters, and we'll use the same 1/4 inch or 6.25 millimeters for ID of the hose. And you see the value here is calculated out. And again, if I needed to adjust that, I can just select the correct volume. Now, I didn't select a dump for gun 2, so it does not show up here in the configuration. Now I can set up from the mixer, the hose from the mixer to the 2-gun management. And a lot of times that'll come right at the end of the mixer, so there'll be 0 volume there. And I'm going to leave it at 0 for this application. Now we have from the color stack to the flow meter. Depending on how many colors you have and how big your stack is and the location of it, sometimes if you have a big stack, it may be located next to the mix manifold. So we need to know what that volume is. This particular setup, we have the manifold static mix, or the CTM valves are right under the flow meter. So it's approximately 0.5 of a meter. And again, we're going to go with the 6.25. And it calculates out, we have approximately 15.34 cc's. So that's for the A. The B is the same, so I will set it the same. And we have 0.5, 6.25. Again, these may change depending on your application. Then I select the next. If we had an analog board where we were controlling fluid regulators with I to P's, we would have a board here. Today we're not using it. So we go to the next step, and it's where we set up our faults and stuff, number of faults. So number of successive ratio faults before an alarm. We have 3, that's pretty standard. So if we have 3 off ratios in a row, the machine will fault. If we get 2 and then we get 1 good one, it resets and starts counting all over again. Successful generation before flush. If we're using a flush box, we can set this for 1 up to 10. And what it will do is, if the pot life runs out, we can regenerate material instead of flushing. The advantage of regenerating material is, instead of, if we're still going to be painting that day, we're going to push material with material. So there's 2 thoughts on that. 1, if we flushed it with solvent, that material has gotten twice the viscosity that it normally is. So the solvent's going to pinhole through the center of it and not give a good flush. So by pushing with new material is heavier, we push all that old material out. Now the second thing on that is that we're still in production for that day and we know we're going to spray later. Instead of flushing and then priming again, we save solvent. So we just push with new material and we're ready to go for the next time that you're ready to paint. Gun trigger time without paint, that's our standard. We have that trigger signal on our gun from the atomizing air. And the way it's set up right now is in 30 seconds, if we don't see counts on the flow meter at the end of 30 seconds, we're going to fault. And normally we'll set this down closer to 2 or 3, depending on the part you're spraying. If you're spraying small parts, we want it set at a lower setting. You have your ratio tolerance, 3%. Normally we set it at 5, but you could set it at 3. This is global for all the recipes, and it is the actual percentage. So if I'm at 50% catalyst, it would be 5% of that. If I'm at 10% catalyst, it would be 5% of that 10. So that's important. It's not like on the micro, for those of you who are familiar with it. Okay, on this page, we have the maximum flush and priming time. You want to set this longer than it takes normally to prime and to flush. If you don't, the system will fault out. If you don't want to use this parameter, you can just set it at 0 and you don't have to worry about it. I normally set it at 0 and don't use that. Solvent flow fault, and again, you can change these, all these numbers you can change. Once the operator hits flush, after 20 seconds, it starts looking for counts on the flow meter. If it doesn't see counts on the flow meter, it's going to fault out. So I can adjust that to whatever. Sometimes you need it longer. Say the operator's inside the spray booth, he selects flush, or he has to come out to the control panel, selects flush, and then has to run back in and pull the trigger. So that's why it's adjustable. We want to keep that as low as possible, but you are able to accommodate your situation. The next one is flow rate, mini and max. Now this is the global setting for all your recipes. In the recipe, you'll be able to fine tune it and set it for that recipe. Whatever you have set in the recipe is going to override this setting. But this just makes it easy for you to set it globally. We have a minimum and a maximum flow rate. Sometimes you may not even want to use this, but we do have situations where, say you have a long hose, they're painting a big piece of machinery or a vehicle, and somebody runs over the hose with a forklift. Well, you can set this down. If you know you're normally spraying at 500 cc's, you could go ahead and set that for, say, 1,000 cc's. So if I go over 1,000 cc's, I'm going to fault. So if somebody were to drive over that hose and broke the hose, obviously the material would start flowing fast. Well, we would shut it down when it hit 1,000 cc's. So that's where you can use something like that. And then enable alarms. So you want to make sure that you turn all these alarms on and you select the box there. Reason why you might want to turn them off is if you're setting up the unit and you don't know what pressures you need on your inbound fluid regulators or your inbound pumps. This will give you the ability to turn it off without it faulting. And of course it's going to ask you, are you sure you want to disable this? And you can say yes. So it disables my alarms. Now I can go ahead. Now you don't want to spray good parts, but you have the operator spray some cardboard or some waste parts and get an idea for what kind of pressure he needs at the gun. So that'll allow me to adjust my pressures without it faulting. Once you get it set up, you definitely want to come back in and turn that back on. You must run in production with that on. Now, we are able to communicate with some of the robots. A robot is another PLC or another controller. We're currently working on this. Not all this has been, all the details have been worked out, but we do have the ability to go Modbus, Ethernet, Profinet, CC-Link. Those are all the different languages we can use to communicate with other PLCs. This is a very important screen. This is where you set up your products here. So right now we have solvent for base, which is solvent SA, solvent for catalyst, solvent SB. So now when I click on these and I hit edit, you can see it tells me the type, the product name, and any of these white boxes you can change. Just touch the screen and you could change it to whatever you want to name it. Now the important one is the output. In an earlier video we showed you how to connect the air tubing, and we normally start out with the first output is solvent, but you can change that to whatever output you'd like. You notice some of these are black, white with a black writing on the inside. Those are valves that are open. So I can select that valve. You notice how it changed from there. If I hit save, now that's going to be my solvent output. Right now though, on this particular one, it's not going to let me change back. I'll have to go here and go here and select that one again. So that tells me what output I'm firing for what product. So that's my solvent base, and I'm on output 1. Now my VOCs, depending on what solvent, could be anywhere from 100% to, for some of the more volatile solvents, or if I'm using an exempt solvent, it could be 0. Or in one case, if I'm using water to flush. We have flow meter size. The standard setup is going to be 0.24, but I can actually go in and calibrate and fine tune this. If I go here, it's going to tell me what I need to do to get to that screen. I need to prime the system first, up through the ratio check valve, or sorry, the calibration valves, my test valves. So I want to fill them first. I select fill, and then hit start. It's going to start loading the system. When I feel like I've got enough material, all the air worked out, I hit stop. Now I'm ready to go into calibration. We'll go into this a little bit more later on in our series of videos. So I'm going to get out of this for now. But that's how you would, or where you would calibrate, is in this screen here. So you notice I only have solvent, I don't have any products. So what I need to do is go in and say add, select my product. I have a choice of A, or base A, catalyzer B, solvent A, or solvent B. So I'm going to select base A, and then I can name that, and I'll just call it red for now. And then I need to select my output. Now remember, when we set this up earlier, we had our first output was going to be solvent, and then our second one is going to be our first color. So I'll select 2, hit the green arrow to validate, and now I'm on output 2 for this color. Again, I can set my VOCs, and that's going to come from your product data sheets from the paint supplier, and I'll say it's 50% solids or 50% solvent, and then hit my check mark. You've successfully added a new product. Do you want to start the calibration? This particular time I'm not going to start, so I'll say no. And it was preset in there 0.24. So that's going to be pretty close and should be able to get you started, but you should always calibrate at the beginning of the process. So now I need a catalyst. So I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to go to catalyzer B, and then I'm going to name it. I'm just going to say Cat. Cat 1, enter. And I need to name an output for it. And again, when we set this machine up earlier, we selected output 5 for the catalyst. So output 5, and again, VOCs, I'll say it's 20%. And no, I'm not going to calibrate this one either. So now I have my base, my catalyst, my 2 flushes. If I wanted to add more colors, I would go in here again, just hit add, and then go through that process. If I wanted to add more solvents or more catalysts, this is where you add them all. Okay, on this screen, we're doing the machine flush. I have autonomous option, which is checked, or if I uncheck it, I can actually go in here and set my own values for my flush. I can customize the flush. So I could start out with, I want to do, product. I want to flush gun circuit 1 and select the product. I'm going to flush with the base solvent first, and then I set how many cc's I want. And outlets gun or dump. I'm going to set dump for that. And then I do that for all 4 steps. I can only, if I only want to do 1 step or 2 steps, that's fine. But I have 4 steps to do for the machine flush. Now if I select autonomous, I just go here and then I will select what solvents I want to use, and it'll automatically calculate out the flush. So I won't have to worry about setting any values. It's going to use the values that we set up earlier in the thing for each hose. So now we don't have to worry about setting any of those steps. This is where we would set up our phone. We have a phone app for both Apple and Android. We'll discuss that later in the program. But this is the screen that you would come to. You would take a picture of that barcode there, and then it would take you into what you need to set up. If we were communicating through the Ethernet, we would click that on, and that is all we have for our configuration. Next up will be setting the recipes.
We will now show how to create and enter a recipe into the Evo control screen. Select the recipe icon on the front screen. You can provide a name for the recipe. This can be a color, a batch number, a material code, the part being painted, or any desired name. In this instance, we will enter the name red by tapping the screen and entering the letters. Next, we will tap and enter the designation of 1K or 2K for the recipe. Now we will name the A-side product for a 2K application. In this instance, red was already entered as the name. We will leave it for this purpose. You will select the check mark to save and populate the settings screen. We will do the same process for the B-side. Again, this was already named as Cat 1. We will also leave this as the name. Then select the check mark. Always remember to select the check mark after any change, or it will not save the name or setting. Here is the setting for the remote piloted regulator pressures in PSI. You will enter the value for both A and B, then select Save. Next, you will enter the B-side ratio. Select the percentage box, then enter the recommended ratio percentage per the product data sheet. You may also enter the ratio in parts. Select this box and enter numbers in parts. For this instance, we will select 2:1, which is 50%. Once entered, the Evo system will calculate the parts into percentage. The next area is for pot life settings. This will be entered in time. Again, this information will be gathered from the product data sheet. The next selection is for using an autonomous flush. If this is selected, the system will flush according to the hose length setting entered in the parameters earlier during configuration. If you prefer to manually input the minimum and maximum range, you will select the boxes and enter the amount. Next is for an autonomous injection time. If this is selected, the system will automatically set the injection rate from the set ratio entered earlier. If you prefer entering manually, you will be shown this on the following page as your gain adjustment and uncheck the box. Next will be the flow rate check for minimum and maximum settings per recipe. You can select and provide whatever flow parameter you wish. If the actual flow rate goes outside of these set parameters, the system will alarm. Now on to setting the injection rate gain. Manually entering the information here will allow you to set how long the injection valve stays open while triggering. The last page is for setting the steps and timing of your production flush. When selected, there are a possibility of 20 steps that can be set for the flush sequence. When the step line is selected, it will allow you to set up the strategy for each step of the process. You can set a delay time, volume of the solvent used, time for an air chop, or select delete to eliminate the step altogether. Again, there are 20 possible steps, 5 pages of 4 steps each. In order to populate and move to the next screen in set of 4, you must have the 4th box populated, and so on, for every screen up to the 5th page. And this concludes recipe setting for the Cyclomix Evo. Thank you.